This is David Navara from the Czech Republic. A little bit about David. Quite a great player, rated 2706. You want to pause the video and read about David? This is the other player in the match in Czechoslovakia. This is Grandmaster Karl Nakamura, number 3 in the world. Here's a little bit about Karl if you want to pause the video. My buddy from the United States, Karl Nakamura. Hi folks, John Cordisco here. Game 2 of the match between Karl Nakamura, my buddy from the United States, and David Navara from the Czech Republic. It's being played in the Czech Republic. This is Game 2 of their 4-game match. Nakamura is white, Navara is black. It's going to be a semi-Slav, so let's get to it. D5, C3, C6 makes it the semi-Slav, E3, knight, bishop D3. This is all theory. Pawn takes. Now you see that a lot. That pawn in C4 could have been captured any time. But black usually waits until the light squared bishop moves and then he captures it, making the bishop move again in a weird way, picking up a tempo. B5 hitting the bishop. Bishop D3, bishop comes back. Now that dark squared bishop for white is kind of hemmed in, but that won't be forever. Bishop D6, and they both castle. Got my Fritz 13 computer on off screen. It's about 2/3 pawn advantage for white. Nothing really to write home about. Queen to C2, typical. You see a queen bishop battery bearing down on black's king side. Bishop B7, A3. Probably stopping that annoying B4. Rook C8, Rook D1. I'm surprised she didn't go Rook E1. I'm looking at the computer here off screen, and it's got B4 as the #1 move, and second is Queen to E2, moving the queen again. The Karl went Rook to D1. I'm sure they're all still in theory. We're only on move 12. C5 to go after white's center immediately. Black sacrifices a pawn here. Bishop takes. Excuse me. Bishop takes. Pawn takes. Now, white's up a pawn, but it's really disrupted white's kingside pawn. So let's see how that works out. C takes. Rook takes. White has the bishop pair, but his king protection is a little slim. Bishop E5 hitting the rook. Rook goes right back to D1. Now, if you remember from game 1, Karl had a pretty good game most of the game, and at the very end there was a very slick tactic where David Navara kind of messed up. We'll see how this goes. I will interject here and get back to the game. I'm a little disappointed. I know probably Karl committed to this match quite a while ago, but right now Norway Chess is also playing, and nothing against David Navara, nothing against the Czech Republic or the organizers of the match, but I think Karl might have been better served playing in Norway. Rook to C5. I myself, to be honest with you, I kind of like bishop takes. Forcing the pawn to take, because queen can't because of the rook, and isolating the pawn on C3, that's just me. Rook to C5, but Navara. And Karl does go back to E2. Right now it's a tiny advantage for black. Quarter pawn. Queen to B8. Now the computer has suggested if queen had gone to C7, putting some serious power on this file, because you're going to see the rook can come over after that. It would have went F4, bishop takes, pawn takes. Interesting, to say the least. Now you see why, of course, black can't take this pawn. After bishop checks, and the rook is also hitting that as well. That loses a piece. After queen to b8, f4 hitting the bishop. Bishop takes. Bishop takes there, which I find interesting. Knight takes. Rook takes. Bishop goes back to f6. So Karl had solved the problem on isolating by taking B takes C and isolating the pawn. So he fixed that. He chases the rook. Bishop takes, pawn takes, queen to C8, hitting the rook. And the queen goes to B5. Now, in the last couple of moves, Carl has pretty much evened out this game. He was a little behind. I like White's position a little bit better. Only the reason why, most of the reason, is the fact that he's got that C pawn that's pretty far down. He's on the 5th rank. After Nakamura went queen to B5, the computer has suggested instead maybe it's worth considering rook back to D1 and then E5, rook to D5 is the continuation. Maybe, you know. But after White plays E takes F for White, and the pawns are still double, so I'm not so sure about that. A6 hitting the queen. Queen comes back to D3. That's a good spot, and protect the rook and have the power right on the D file. Queen takes. Bishop D2. Now Carl gave that pawn back. Right now the computer shows it as 0.00, dead even. A5, H3, G6, rook B7. Now, I'm not sure why Carl did that. I went over this game earlier and I really don't know the reason. The only thing I can think of is if he went rook here, then eventually queen comes here, facing the king side. Rook to B7, F6, rook to B5. He wanted to reroute that rook, obviously. Queen moves. Bishop takes the pawn. Now, if he had taken with the rook, rook to D8, queen to B5, queen takes, rook takes, and Carl loses a piece. That's why the rook takes was wrong. The bishop was correct. Queen to F3. Now, looks like White's king's a little loose, but frankly, there's nothing really Black can do right there. Right now, Black's rook's not in play, and the king's pretty safe there. This pawn, of course, is in pre, but so Carl goes queen to F1, and that takes care of that. I'm not sure, you know, bringing the queen there, but what else could he do? Rook C8. Rook comes back to B1 for protection. We can always see, though, of course, the bishop can come here, and the pawn and the bishop guard each other, so that's okay. King to G7 to get off the back rank. Bishop to F4, or excuse me, B4. And now the rook comes in. Looks like Black's got a little bit of an attack. To be perfectly frank, it's dead even. Queen. What to do? What to do? Do you trade queens here? Or do you move the queen off? He moved the queen off to E2. Queen goes to F1. Queen to H5. Queen to F3 was interesting. But you'd be right back where you were before. After queen to H5, queen to D3, hitting the rook. Rook comes back to C8. White's got a little bit of advantage now. The rook's not really coming after the king. King comes up to G2. Now, Black's queen's not in a very good spot. Can't move. Unfortunately, White can't attack it, but rook to D8, hitting the queen. Queen goes to E4. Queen to E2 for Navara. And Carl goes rook to C1. Right now the computer goes queen to A6 is the move that probably should be done by Navara. And he goes H6. And that bumps up the advantage for White to about 1.5 points. You got to remember, he's up a pawn already. After queen to A6, the computer suggested A4. And of course we see why the queen can't take. Because bishop checks. And you lose the queen. After H6, A4. Now this is where Navara stumbles. Now, I'm just guessing this, of course. We're on move 39 for Black. And he stumbles here. Double question mark. Queen to D3. Rook, queen takes, rook takes, a5. Black's in a lot of trouble. A lot of trouble. Rook to b3. Rook c4, protecting the bishop. How's he going to stop that pawn? Rook to b2. Bishop a3. Rook to a2. Rook a4. And it's Black's doomed. Bishop e7. How's he going to stop the pawn? He just continues pushing. And after bishop takes, Hikaru goes a7. And that's the end of that. There's no way that you can get a discovered check with a dark squared bishop. You can't stop the pawn. It's going to end up on a light square. So this is where David Navara resigned. You have to learn to manage your time. That's the way it goes sometimes. So that's 2 games in a row for my buddy Hikaru in a 4-game match. Interesting game. Pretty much similar to last time. Towards the end, Navara stumbled. And I do want to make a comment. I hear this a lot on videos on chess where, well, this person wouldn't have won if this person hadn't screwed up or this and that. Well, the fact of the matter is, nobody can win unless there's a mistake. You don't win a baseball game if the team you're playing against plays perfect. You're not going to win a football or a soccer match if your opponent plays perfectly. It'll be a 0-0 game. All sport, no matter what it is based on errors from your opponent. Hopefully you make less errors than your opponent, and that's how you win. Anyway, folks, I just want you all to remember, if you think chess is just a game, you're not playing it right. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.